And welcome to Civil Discourse. I'm Jayme Wojciechowski, and today we're discussing mindfulness, meditation, and politics. Would you both like to introduce yourselves really quick? Start with Marilyn.
Ursula, you want to start?
Oh, sure. I'll start.
Okay.
I'm Ursula Foster. I'm a licensed massage therapist and a self-care strategist, and I help women create self-care plans so that they can live a less busy and more focused life.
And I'm Marilyn, Mindful Marilyn. I'm a marriage and family therapist in private practice, and I am also a mindfulness instructor. I've been teaching mindfulness in the context of dialectical behavior therapy for about a decade, and I've been practicing formal sitting meditation for the last 2 years myself. And I also do some activism around reducing the stigma of mental health issues in general.
Awesome. So the first thing, this is what we did last time. Last time we had a lot of technical difficulties, so we're rehaving this conversation. I would like to dive into exactly what mindfulness is. We kind of touched on it a little bit at the beginning last time, but I'd like to go in a little deeper. So yeah, if you both just want to kind of express what mindfulness is to you right now.
Well, I think I said the first time, and I'll just go a little deeper, but it starts with taking ourselves off autopilot and becoming aware of what we're doing. And that's every area of our life. What we eat, where we work, who we connect with, who we let in our own personal space. In every area, just becoming aware of what is going on around you in your world.
Yeah, I definitely agree 100% with Ursula on that. Mindfulness is really at its core about fully being aware. And with that awareness, there's no judgment of the moment. So you're fully aware. And so for me, mindfulness is about everything. You can really tie mindfulness and practice mindfulness in a couple of different ways. And so when I teach my clients, I teach them formal mindfulness practices, which one of the most widely known formal mindfulness practices is meditation, and is formal sitting meditation. But outside of that, there's so many different ways and so many different techniques to tune in and really increase your mindfulness awareness through different body work, through breathing techniques. So, for me, it sounds, I don't know, kind of over the top, but I feel like mindfulness really is everything.
Yeah. So I'd like to, I think most people know mindfulness in its connection to meditation. They kind of think of it almost one and the same.
Right.
So I guess a lot of the people I've meditated with or had experience with mindfulness with, one of their biggest challenges is they're super mindful when they're in their meditation, but they don't really have the skill set to bring that into their everyday life. So what are some tips you may have to bridge that gap?
So for me, that was mine kind of went the other way. And so I was able to bring mindfulness into other areas of my life before it was easier for me to get comfortable with my sitting meditation. And one of the ways that did that for me is music. I really connect with music, and I feel like I kind of experience the world through music. And so I started using mindfulness and creating playlists for myself that have a mindful message. And it's amazing because, when you start to experience the world through more mindful ears and eyes and senses, you notice it kind of everywhere. And so songs that I knew my whole life and always loved, I never really heard what they were saying until I started to really practice mindfulness and work on non-attachment. And then it opened my eyes to so many different things. And so for me, I will have playlists, and I'll start my day with just listening to certain music that really tunes me into that mindful space. And I really find that very, very helpful. And I think a lot of people connect to music, and so sound is so universal. And so I think that's a great way to bring mindfulness into other areas of your life where you may not normally be able to sit and practice meditation, so driving, for example, you can't really, you can't meditate while you're driving, but driving can be one of the most stressful things, right? One of the most stressful things, to do. And I think we're all in the LA area. And so driving can be a real challenge. And so creating a playlist that for you makes you feel calm, or makes you feel present, or powerful, or positive, or whatever that message is that you need, I think can be really, really a great tool.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you say this, because I have mixed feelings about the use of music, mostly in meditation practice, which isn't what you're talking about. But what I love that you said was, you were talking about when you make the playlist and you're listening to the music, make the music your focus and really listen to it. Because I think a lot of people, what they do is they'll play music during meditation almost as a way to distract themselves or make it easier. And they're just creating an extra distraction, as opposed to trying to actually be in the moment and be focused. Where what you're talking about is actually, if you're going to use music, make that your focus and really try to listen to it.
Yes, exactly. And it's amazing what happens when you do that, when you really fully tune your senses into what you're listening to. I mean, there are times where songs that I've, again, heard my whole life gave me physical chills, or, real physical, emotional reactions, because I was being really intentionally present when I listened to it.
Can you guys still hear me? Because I think I'm just audio only, but
nope, we can see you and hear you.
See you.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, no, you're good.
I try to bring the mindfulness piece to my massage clients by making them aware of what they do every day. Usually when they come to me, it's like, oh, my neck hurts, my back hurts, all these kinds of things that they're aware of. And I'm like, well, what did you do? What did you do just today? And they're like, oh, well, I sat at my computer. And I'm like, well, how long did you sit at your computer? Well, about 4 hours. And they didn't move. They didn't get up. They didn't do anything. So I'm like, listen, why don't you get up every 20 minutes, stretch your legs out, walk around, roll your neck, roll your shoulders back, and come away from it for a minute. Every 20 minutes. And when they come back to see me for a massage, they're like, you know what? That really helped. That's not a real deep, mindful thing. It's just saying, I can't sit at my computer for 4 hours straight and expect my neck and my back to not hurt. So I like bringing awareness to things like that, things every day that are very common, that we do on autopilot. I have to keep coming back to that word, because we just do things so blindly. We're like in a routine, in a rut, and we're not even paying attention to what we do every day. And so bringing mindfulness to just the everyday things, it really helps.
Yeah, I really like what you brought up about the awareness, because a lot of times, a lot of the focus in mindfulness is on being focused and being present and being really engaged with what you're doing, and not letting the distractions around you distract you, really. And what I like about the awareness is that it is the other half of that, because it's easy to get mindlessly consumed in something, and it feels like you're completely focused on it, but you're actually not being mindful, because you don't have the awareness to go with that focus. And I think those two things really both need to be present in order for there to actually be mindfulness. in the situation.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
piece about being quiet and focused, and that is important. But I went to a yoga meditation class here in the Los Angeles area, and the way the place is situated, it's on a busy highway, and so you can hear traffic all outside. And the host of the meditation made a point to tell us about that. She was like, you know, sometime in real life, you can't just have it perfectly and completely quiet. Well, we're going to do this meditation, all the traffic and, you know, people walking by the door and all of that. And we're going to learn how to, within the midst of things, we're going to learn how to be mindful. And we're going to still learn how to still ourselves. And that's the first time I've ever done a meditation like that, with all the traffic in the background, all the noise in the background. It was actually very enlightening. I enjoyed that meditation.
Yeah. And I would recommend everybody trying that, because I know it's very interesting, because when I am with mindfulness clients and they're discussing what they've been doing, I hear so often that their partner will be vacuuming and it will just make them so angry because they can't be mindful, or there will be traffic and they can't be mindful. Where I practiced in Chicago, actually above where we used to sit was a dance class, and I think it was Tuesday nights. On Tuesday nights, they were doing like clog dancing. So it just sounded like a herd of elephants above you. Plus, we were on a major street, so you heard all the traffic, and there was a train. There was a train as well. So it was just so loud, and it was insane. And then on Thursday, it was a lot quieter. How me going and continuing to go on Tuesday, when it was quiet, I was able to just instantly find my mindfulness in the quiet. And the noise, after it was rough at the beginning, but after a while, I would learn that, okay, I'm distracted by it. Okay, I was distracted. Now let's come back to counting my breaths or doing whatever I was doing. And it became easy. And it's not about trying to tune that out. That's actually the opposite of mindfulness, trying to tune it out. It's letting your mind go. And if you notice that it went and is now listening to the train going by, just bring it back to your breath. And then when you find yourself being distracted again, you just bring it to your breath. And I think also going back to how to take mindfulness off the meditation cushion and bring it into your life is this is easy if you have an art, or try to get a hobby that requires a lot of focus that you can actually make a point to try to do more mindfully. Because when I practiced Zen in Chicago, they had calligraphy, and we had some sword forms, and there were a bunch of activities that you intentionally tried to bring mindfulness to, and that really helped bridge the gap.
I think that's a really great addition, and really important to find something where, you know, you're able to bring mindfulness into it, but enjoy it, be able to kind of focus and build on something. You know, that concept of building mastery, I think, is important. So you don't want to practice mindfulness with something that is just so easy that you can just kind of tune it out and just go on autopilot again. You know, so you want it to be something that you can build on and build a skill. I think that's really important. And also going back to bringing mindfulness into your everyday life, mindfulness of our own thoughts is so important. And so that's one of the kind of first skills that I teach and work with my clients on, is becoming more mindful of their thoughts, and really importantly, in a non-judgmental way, you know, because a lot of times when we start to become aware of our thoughts and maybe aware of how critical we've been on ourselves, then you know, want to jump in and start judging it. And that's not mindful either. And so really making sure that you're able to practice being aware of your thoughts and aware of, you know, working on mindfulness of your thoughts, but without judgment. So I actually recommend with my clients that they pick a short period of time every day for a couple of weeks where they notice judgments. And so I do, you know, in session, I'll go through and we point out every different kind of thing that could be a judgment and what those look like. And so then the person is kind of ready to go into their day and just pick a certain time. I don't want you to do it all day because we judge all day long and it would be mind numbing to try to do that. But to pick even, maybe not even a full hour, maybe even just 15 minutes or 20 minutes and just kind of notice how many judgmental thoughts or non-mindful thoughts your brain shoots out all day. And if we attach to those, what happens? If we attach to those, what happens to how we feel? And so if we're able to just be mindful and notice them and let them go, then we're much more free to act in line with our actual values. So
yeah,
I think that's important, is that mindfulness of thoughts. And as you practice these things that we've all talked about with you know, the music and the just checking in with what you're doing throughout the day and all of these different things, that builds up your mindful awareness of your thoughts. And so, like, I've noticed for myself, I catch those judgmental thoughts pretty quickly and can kind of turn them around without going on to that, you know, train. I mean, it still happens sometimes. I'm human and that's going to happen, but it's a much quicker process. And I think everything really builds onto all of the practices build on each other.
Yeah. And okay.
I think that's a myth that people feel like, okay, I'm mindful now. You know, I'm about meditation and Zen. So therefore, those thoughts will never come in, and you know, everything is great and wonderful and perfect. And no, it's not true. The meditation and the mindfulness and the awareness are simply tools for you to get through this life in a better way. Not to say the rain isn't going to fall on you like it falls on everyone else, you know. And I'm just surprised at how people say, well, I've been meditating for a month, and you know, I still get negative thoughts. And I'm like, well, congratulations, because a lot of people don't know that they are getting negative thoughts. They don't catch it. They don't acknowledge them, and they don't do anything to change them. So, you know, woo for you.
Yeah. And I think too, like, I love what you're saying about acknowledging the judgment. And I was in acting class for a while, and one of the big things was whenever they encourage you that whenever you find yourself having a critical or judgmental thought, become aware of it, but then also force yourself to find whatever you're being judgment in, something positive about it. And then I think when you do those multiple steps and then you do the positive, you start to learn how you can control the way you think as opposed to your mind controlling you, which is a big part of mindfulness, is that people go through their lives really just being victims, not the right word, but really just responding to whatever stimulus is around them, as opposed to having any really control in the matter. And then they attach to the negative things, and then those negative things start to consume them because they have no power to be aware of why they're feeling that way or what the situation actually is. And that awareness is really the first step to finding control, which is also an interesting concept, because you find control, but mindfulness is also all about letting go of control. So to find control, you have to let go of control.
Let go, right? It's interesting.
A balance, definitely a balance there.
Yeah. One other thing I think is so important as I look around my space right now is your environment for mindfulness and reminders. I know for me, just keeping things in my visual space that remind me that, you know, I'm okay, that I'm safe, that the world is safe. I have a sign on my front door when I leave that says, just breathe, you know, just little things like that. I have different things in my car. I have, you know, things kind of hanging around the tree of life behind me. I feel like when you pay attention to your space and to your environment as well, and what things you take in around you when you're just kind of there, I think that's extremely important to increase your mindful awareness. So I really try to fill up my space and help my clients to think about and fill up their space with things that bring them to that mindful place as well.
So I'm interested in if you both can remember what your initial reaction and beginning journey was with meditation. Because I think that'll just be useful because there's so many misconceptions. What you experienced maybe in your first month or first 2 months.
Well, for me, it was a pretty rocky start. It was probably like a 7-year long avoidance of something that I felt called to do and wanted to do and knew the benefits of, because I researched and educated other people about it. But when I first tried, I gave up. I said, this is not for me. My mind's all over the place. I didn't realize that was okay. I wasn't, I don't know if I wasn't taught necessarily or if I just didn't pay attention to, that might have been the case as well. But I didn't realize that the goal was not to clear my head and, kind of wipe everything out. And so I got very frustrated with the monkey mind and with my brain jumping from branch to branch and just all over the place. And I was like, this isn't for me. I don't need to do the meditation part. I'll just focus on mindfulness and I'll learn all these other skills. And so I didn't really make too much of an effort towards sitting back, doing just formal sitting meditation again until things happened in my life that I couldn't really control. And there was a huge crisis. And I was kind of left with like, okay, well, now what? And that's what took me to my formal sitting meditation. And it was rocky then still, it was definitely still not an easy process, but I had learned enough and more about it at that point. I had really supportive groups that I worked with to meditate with, which was helpful too. So I found a community and didn't try to do it alone like I did previously. So that made a difference as well. But it was still a challenge. And then, I just kept at it. I think that's the key for a lot of things is just going back to the cushion, just sitting back down. If you fall asleep, that's fine. Whatever happens is okay, but just go back and try and do it again.
For me, the whole mindfulness piece, I left that completely out when I first started meditating. I didn't even think about it. It was more of this formal sitting quiet, getting all zen, and closing your eyes and shutting out all thoughts. And I practiced and worked really hard at trying to do that. And I guess maybe after a year or more even, I was like, it's got to be a better way because I'm not getting it. My mind is not clearing and I must be doing something wrong. So I started to ask questions, do some more reading, do a little more research, go to people who've been doing this longer than me, in a different way than me. And then that's when the mindfulness started coming out. And even that expanded. It expanded to not so formal, sitting quiet and zen. It started to spill over into everyday life. And then that's when I really started to get it, and then now when I sit down in a more formal fashion to do, meditation, I've been doing mindfulness in other areas of my life all week. Now this meditation is boss. It's awesome now. Elements in to the meditation. It makes it even better. So,
yeah, I was very lucky, I think, in the way I found meditation because it just was supernatural. I was in college and I was a theater major and I was doing a lot of physical theater and doing a lot of these workshops, and a lot of the instructors would talk about meditation and mindfulness and trying to be more mindful so that you can be more connected to the people you're moving with. So we used to just meditate 5 minutes before each session. And then I was in the UK at the time, and then I moved back to Chicago. And this is something maybe I should explore more. And I went to a Zen Buddhist temple. And what was great about it was that it was rooted in meditation, in Zazen, but it also was an Aikido school. And the lineage came from the samurai in Japan. So they had different sword forms to include mindfulness. We did a lot of walking meditation. They did the calligraphy. They had all these special breathing practices. And everything I was doing was directly beneficial to my acting at the time. So I think my journey would have been very, very different if I was just at a place where it was just, we're going to sit for 40 minutes and me trying to do it that way. I learned very quickly that I needed to find a place with people where I would be forced to sit because me doing it at home for probably the first 2 years just was not possible. I would just tell myself I'm going to get up, and I had the power to get up and stop, and I was like, I'll just stop. And I was maybe 10 minutes, and then I'd go in a class and be with everyone's collective energy, and 45, an hour, hour and a half would go by of meditation, and it was, I'm not going to say easy, it was very challenging, but when you have those other people there, you have that extra, it's not support. I don't want to, it's kind of support, that extra, that energy that tells you,
it's like that.
Well, for me, it was very much, well, I don't want to distract anyone else, so I'm not going to move type thing. So that's how I felt about it. But yeah, I think a lot of places, an important thing I would say is try, if you find it difficult to start a meditation practice, try to find other ways that I'm trying to use the right words, not appeal to you, but just other ways to do it. You can do Tai Chi, or find lots of different Buddhist places have different things. They'll have chanting, or they'll have calligraphy, or they'll have walking meditation. And most of those places are donation based, so you're not going to be spending $500, a few $1,000 to learn how to meditate. And a lot of them, too, do your research. A lot of them are more practice and experience based. They're not based in any dogma, so you can be any other religion if you're religious and still go practice that. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think just to kind of add to what you said, I think use the things that you know about yourself to find the best way to kind of get to it. So like, Jayme, you knew that doing it at home wasn't, didn't work for you. And so you went and you found a place to go. Some people, have social anxiety. And so doing it in a group, doing it in a room full of people may be too difficult. And so doing it at home, finding an online group, there's actual online meetings where you can do, meditate in a group, but you're all at home and online and you're still connecting with the collective energy. So I think that's important, is kind of know your own challenges. For me, one of my biggest challenges is that when something doesn't come so easy, I'm like, not doing this anymore. I've just, that's always been one of my challenges, is that if I'm not super great at something right away, or it doesn't come really, really naturally, then it's really hard to go back and do it again. And so I think that's what happened at the beginning for me, because I didn't really make an effort to go back for a few years. But now, when I came back to it later, I knew that, and I was more aware of that. And I was like, this is tough, and you're going to want to say, screw it, and not do it anymore, and go sit back the next day and just keep doing it.
I had a question for you two.
Okay.
I hear a lot of things about guided meditation versus, just being quiet. What do you think? I know sometimes, well, mostly in the beginning, I needed to have the guided meditation, and I actually recorded some myself and put them up on my website for people who are beginners, who kind of lead a little direction. But I hear other people say, oh no, guided meditation is not as good, or whatever. So what are you guys' opinions on that?
Yeah, my opinion is, especially for beginners, is do whatever attracts you and works for you at the beginning. And at the end of the day, it's all about awareness. So sometimes I tend to do very little guided meditation myself, but a lot of times when I'm working with clients, I'll do it if I feel like they need it. And within the guided meditation, I'll have prolonged periods of silence. But it's nice, especially for people who are developing the ability to be aware, to just be able to remind them, like, where's your mind right now? And if it's distracted by something, just in this moment, be aware of what it's distracted by, and come back to counting your breath or do whatever you're doing. So I think it's a guide, but then the downside to it is that it also then can easily become a crutch of, okay, I'll just let my mind do whatever it's going to do, and then wait for the person to be like, come back. And then, so I'll just get distracted for the 20 minutes and then, they tell me to come back. Okay, I'll come back for that second and then get distracted. So it's like anything else. It's just a tool. So if you're actively trying to build awareness using that tool, then it's going to be beneficial. If not, then you're probably not going to have as much growth.
Yeah, I think I agree with that notion. I say do what works in the beginning. Do whatever you're interested in. Do whatever you're interested in, and what's going to get you to actually sit down and make a consistent practice. And then as your mindfulness practice grows and your awareness grows, hopefully so does your use of the crutches kind of goes down. And I think that for a lot of people can be a natural process. You may get stuck with certain helps, but I think, guided meditation is kind of like training wheels a little bit. Like, they're there to support you, and it can really help you in the beginning. And then at some point, you want to ride the bike without them. But I also like guided meditation, going back to that, just for different things. So I'll do, specific guided meditations or specific like journey or shamanic journey meditations that are, for different things, but those don't take the place of my regular practice.
Yeah. And I think it's dangerous in the mindfulness practice to get to a place where you think, oh, the way I do mindfulness is the right way. Because one, that's not very mindful. And I think a big part of mindfulness is this childlike approach to life, in that you try to approach everything as if it's the first time, without preconceived notions or judgment. So I think, one, then you can't judge what you're doing in comparison to everything else. And two, it's beneficial to your practice to try all these things. And, you might do, at the beginning, you might sit and be like, oh, just sitting doesn't work for me. I need to do guided meditation. But at some point, you should analyze, why didn't that work for me? What was my resistance? What was happening there? Maybe now I'm becoming much more aware of my thoughts. Maybe I can do it, so I should go back to doing that. Or I've only been sitting in meditation for 6 months, and I've been having problems at work being mindful. Maybe I should just set aside 5 minutes at work where I type mindfully. You should try different things. And the other thing I want to talk about is, because the three of us are very spoiled being in Los Angeles. But for people who are in small towns or places where there isn't as much access to Buddhist temples or yoga studios or stuff like that, what would you recommend for them?
Well, you asking what I would recommend as far as doing some group meditation, or just
Just in general,
what
how
would
to
I
get
recommend if you don't
started.
have that?
Yeah, if you don't
Yeah,
have
well,
that network.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think if you don't have a network, my favorite, the temple that I feel the most connected to is nature. And so getting outside, spending some time in nature is, you'll be amazed at what, I mean, I think we've all been amazed at what happens when you do that. And so that's what I would recommend to somebody, get outside and just sit in the quiet. Don't have any goal. Don't try to clear your mind. Don't try to do anything. Just sit under a tree for 20 minutes, and breathe and see what happens. And so that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Every town has a park, or a gathering place, perfect. Going outside, in the park, nature. You really don't need anything else.
Right. Looking up at the stars. I have a client who goes and lays out on a roof. And that's like where when she needs to get away, and she just looks up at the sky and just enjoys just being able to see the wide open sky from her roof.
Yeah, and if you're trying to learn too, there's endless resources online. Because even if you're struggling or you just want to have some guide, you can do a guided meditation outside. And then if it's 20 minutes, then sit for another 20 minutes after, just staring at the stars. And there's endless amounts. I know there's a Zen temple that broadcasts, I think, twice a day, their meditation sessions, so people can join along. And meetup.com is great. If you don't have a network, you can start your own. And even you can add it to other things, because you might be in a town where people aren't apt to come to a mindfulness group, but you can do a book club and just say, at the beginning of each book club, we're going to do a 20-minute meditation. And then go online, find a guided one or whatever. You can find non-denominational type ones that are very for everybody or for a specific thing. I'm sure you can find book club ones online if you wanted one. So that would be my recommendation as well.
Yeah, I like that.
That people talk about with meditation, and people have been asking me a lot about yoga as well. They think that it has to be connected with a religion, and they're like, Ursula, I'm not a Buddhist, I'm not into Hinduism. I'm like, who says that it has to be? It's my mom felt that way, and she's 68 years old now, and she just started doing yoga. It's been a whole year now, and that was one of the things that was tripping her up. She was like, Ursula, I'm not all into that. I say, well, you don't have to be into that. You can bring your beliefs into it. It's your practice. And now she can't do without it. She does yoga twice a week, and she does not play. And I've had other people come to me, pull me aside and say, I'm not into that. I'm not religious. And I just want the people to know, please know, it's not a religion.
And it's actually, it's funny too, because I'm a Zen Buddhist, and the interesting thing about Buddhism is that it's a very different type of religion, and I'd even hesitate to call it that, because really what happened is exactly what you're talking about. Is there were these it's a practice-based religion, and there were the meditation practices and stuff like that. And then what ended up happening with it was practice-based. When it would move into different areas, people would just add those practices to whatever religion they already had, and then that became that type of Buddhism. So that's actually how it formed at the beginning, was that it didn't come with a set formula of beliefs. It came with the practice, and then whatever beliefs were in that culture to start with, they added on top. Like, there's nothing in Buddhism about reincarnation, and yet all these cultures have it, because they had reincarnation before Buddhism was introduced.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point to make. And I also, so I have clients who are religious and, pray every day and go to church and are Christian, and they struggle with the idea of meditation and is this going to conflict with what they're doing? And, I've told some of my clients and found them, or they found it helpful for me to instruct them to, do you pray every day? Okay, yeah, I pray. I get down on my knees every day and I pray. And I'd say, well, after you finish praying, just stay in that position and sit for 10 minutes or 20 minutes. Or if it's somebody with a really short, sitting span, 5 minutes, but just sit there after you finish your prayers, that's the time to listen. That's the time to kind of get that response. And so that my clients who have already a strong religious practice for themselves have really found that helpful and found it to be a really great way to weave in the meditation into their current spirituality.
Yeah, I think
it can be an enhancer.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Spiritual practice. I said it can be an enhancer.
Yes.
To
yeah.
spiritual practice that you already have. My mom has been going to the same church for over 30 years, and it doesn't take away from that practice that she already has, what she already does. It really brings more to it.
Yeah.
She figured that out. She figured it out.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And you figure it out as you go. You figure out, what works for you. So a lot of my clients, continued with building their meditation practice and decided to put that at the beginning of their day, do a formal meditation at the beginning of the day, and then at the end their day with their prayers and finding a way to kind of weave those in. So I think it does, you have to find what works for you, but this doesn't go against anything that you're already doing. Mindfulness meditation is only going to enhance.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, what I will say, not really as a devil's advocate, but a lot of times, depending on where you're at, and as a person, a lot of times the mindfulness practice will change the way you see the world, which it may change the way you engage with your religious beliefs. Not necessarily change your religious beliefs, but it may change the way you view them or the way you use them to see the world. So that change, I actually see it majority of the time with very religious clients. It doesn't counter anything they say. They just feel like it's so weird because now I just see my religion in a different light. And then the other thing I will say is that it's like anything, meditation. I have some conflicting feelings about taking meditation completely out of its Buddhist context, just because it's like anything else. It's just the meditation itself is just a tool, and that tool can really be used to be incredibly beneficial. And there are ways to use it poorly. And I think having it grounded in some kind of, what's the term? Not methodology, but have it grounded in some kind of context helps you use it better as a tool. So I think we're seeing kind of that within the clinical mindfulness in the U.S. They're taking it more and more out of the Buddhist context and creating a new context that works with that, but takes it out of any kind of, makes it more clinical as opposed to, I guess, spiritual or religious. So that are my two things with that. So I want to shift into politics a little bit. Just
yay!
How? I guess what would you say with people who? I mean, we're in election season. It's getting crazier and crazier. Just tips for engaging in mindful politics. whether it be engaging with others or in self-care for yourself, but specifically dealing with the political climate. Because I hear a lot when I'm advocating for mindful politics or mindful activism that people don't want to, they fear that means that they're going to become numb and be less energized to fight for change if they're being mindful, if that makes sense. And I see where
that's because
yeah, go ahead.
I feel like that's because their fuel, for lack of a better term, is anger. If I'm not really mad about something, I'm not going to be as effective in, trying to change it. And when you're coming from a place of mindfulness, yes, you're disturbed about it. Yes, you're concerned about it. But that reactive, angry, I'm going to set the whole place on fire kind of, way of looking at politics. And I feel like that is rampant right now. It's just not a good place.
Yeah. I think anger really narrows your view and your perspective, and so you see what you're angry about, and that's understandable, but then you miss all of these other things. You miss a lot of the other important points of how change is actually going to happen. And so mindfulness is really important, and it's hard to, I hear what Jayme's saying. People don't want to bring themselves into that mindful perspective because it feels like it takes the fuel out of the fire. But I think that, it actually, mindfulness, it increases your ability to see solutions and to see the work for a little bit longer. You see the forest past just the trees, and you're able to say, okay, well, this, looking at the climate, looking at where people are at right now, where people's minds and fears are and anxieties are, this is how we have to have this discussion. We can't keep continuing to be polarized. And so I think, if you're coming from that angry perspective, the emotion's valid, but it's going to narrow your view. And so awareness of that is important.
Yeah, I think the thing I like to say is that within mindfulness, no emotion is bad. If you're experiencing anger, that's not bad. The quote unquote bad part is you staying attached to that anger. So the problem I see in politics and activism is that people respond with anger, and that's the driver of what they're doing. And it consumes them, and they just push forward with the anger. Where if you were being mindful, yes, you would experience that anger, but you'd then be able to, you'd become aware of how angry you are, and you'd be able to analyze the situation of, okay, how can I now use this in the most mindful way to create change or help build change? So instead of going and being like, well, I'm going to burn the building down and go on a rampage, you say, oh, I'm going to organize a protest, or I'm going to organize a vigil, or I'm going to organize this thing. And I think it also leads, when you drive with anger and you're so attached to anger, it just feeds into the partisanship of what we see in our politics, which really is the root of what's wrong. Because at the end of the day, no matter what side you're on, the feelings underneath why you think the way you do are the same. And the faster we get to that realization of, we think differently, we have a different worldview, but really what we're feeling is the same right now. How can we come together so that neither of us have to feel this way? Then you can actually have solutions where everyone's on board, as opposed to just staying attached to the anger and feeling like I'm on the right side, they're the wrong side, and just constantly going in at each other. Nothing gets solved.
It brings me back to the commercial. It's kind of silly, but that Twix commercial, the left Twix and the right Twix.
Oh, right, yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's the same damn candy. Everyone's, well, we pour the chocolate on, well, we swirl it on.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of how I feel when I'm talking about and thinking about politics. it's like we all, like Jayme said, at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We're angry at about many of the same things, but we just look at it from a different approach. And that's where all this clashing, comes into play.
Yeah. And we talked a little last time about selective compassion, and the thing is, being compassionate or bringing understanding does not mean you're approving of a situation. So I'm thinking, I watched this newscaster from Australia who's a Muslim newscaster, and this was from a while ago, and it was right after a terrorist attack, and their country responded very much like the U.S. responds, with a lot of Islamophobia and a call to ship every Muslim out of the country and ban Muslims from coming in. And a white woman who I'm assuming was upper class was on a talk show talking about how she feels that it's just too dangerous and too risky and that they should ban all Muslims. And she got all this backlash, right? As the people who say that in America do. She got all these death threats. And the Muslim newscaster said, yes, what she's saying is not mindful and not right. But if you look at why she's saying it, it's because she's scared. And now she has all these death threats. Do you think she's more scared or less scared?
Right.
So there's no solution in that. And it's not about saying, oh, well, I'm going to be compassionate for her and be understanding, and that means I'm going to accept what she's doing. It's saying, well, I'm going to try to understand where she's coming from so I can see the root of where it's coming from so we can go to the root, as opposed to always attacking the result of what's happening and then never fixing any of the problems. Because the thing is, you have, in this specific scenario, you have Muslim people in that country and around the world who are fearful because of the climate. And then you have everyone else who's fearful, and they're just responding differently to that same fear. So we need to fix the fear, and that's the mindful way, is to say, well, what's the root? That's what we're going to try to fix. We're not going to try to fix, just focus nonstop on all these symptoms, which I feel is our political climate currently.
And that's that. Yeah, I think that's our political climate, but that's also kind of how we've done things in Western culture for a while, is going at the symptoms. You look at our medical model and how we deal with disease, and rather than promoting the things that really work to stop the body from getting so sick by, promoting all these things, we poison ourselves, promote all these poisonous things, and then we come up with all these pills to fix that problem or stop that thing, and then, pill created another problem, you have another side effect, here's another pill, and so and that's completely, the opposite of what works. That's a very non-mindful approach. I mean, I think the way we do things needs to be kind of looked at overall, because it's very symptom focused, and just kind of not really actually looking at how we fix the problem.
Yeah, I think we, as a culture, and it's the because we lack, our brains work in a very dualistic way. For survival, that's how we've been built, is to kind of see me here and then this separate thing. And we're constantly separating things into categories, when the world actually works non-dualistically, where everything's interconnected. So it's awareness, I think, brings in, the more aware you are, the more attuned you are to this interconnection and this cause and effect. And I think it's just easy, it's natural for us to look at the macro problems, because they're the biggest, they're the ones that are most present and the ones that affect us the most. And we're not conditioned to look at the micro, and it's the micro that creates those things. Because I always say that about politics. I say, our politics is never going to change until we change, because politics is literally just the government. People like to think that the government is this separate being that exists on its own to come ruin your life. And it's like, the government is literally just people. We created it, and it's just people. If we change the way people are and respond and react to one another, our entire politics will change. So you can constantly go after, let's attack the politicians and let's attack the government and stuff, but that's never going to change the situation. We have to change the way we interact with each other and our families and our loved ones in every situation that we're in. And then we'll create a different kind of people to run the government.
Totally agree with that.
I had another point, but I cannot remember. Alas.
Okay. Say something, Marilyn.
Something you said. What did you say? I loved it. Micro and macro.
I like what she was saying about our healthcare system and just putting a Band-Aid on things and not really getting things. Politics are definitely like that. I mean, at the heart of it, you know, we have the same concerns: safety, proper health care, jobs. You know, if we both all make a list of things that we really care about, the list will be very similar.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I also want to reiterate.
Pretty similar, pretty short. Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I just want to reiterate what we were talking about last time too, about just being aware of how our political system actually works and has always worked. Is that I think a lot of people get really discouraged for many reasons, because they don't see the change they want, and I think we are conditioned to look at things in very small time frames and not in larger time frames. But our government is actually structured so that the government itself doesn't institute change. The whole point of it is to not do that. So what actually creates change are organized social movements and activism. And that's actually not, in my opinion, not a bad thing. Because, I mean, you don't want a government that anyone in there can just create whatever change they want. Right? So when people are feeling negative about the government, remember that change, you actually as a citizen have more power to create change than the government and politicians, because it's those organized social movements putting pressure on the government that has always created change. Any major advancement, revolutionary step that this country has ever made has been caused by a social uprising. And I think we're coming into a new age where before the government was so strong that a lot of times it did have to turn violent. That was really the only way to force the government enough to respond. And I think we're in a great time now with social media where we can actually create those kind of movements online. And it's by creating more of a public consciousness now than necessarily having to burn the place down.
So you're saying that government, it's not, people are looking to individual people in government for change.
Yeah.
And I see that a lot in the Black community. They have all these big expectations, but they're still sitting on their hands. And I'm like, I mean, you can't just wait for the government to make a move. You've got to start that in the water, you know, and then the government, like Jayme was saying, you know, we have to start the ripple in the water, and then the government is going to take notice. And I think social media just helped that go faster.
Yeah.
If you look back at history, like we'll take the civil rights movement, when the news put that on TV and it went to other countries and it just kind of spread, and other places were seeing what was going on in the South, then that's when change made. Now with social media, as it's happening, that we can see it from anywhere, literally on the planet. And that is what makes the change come so much faster than before. But it was other people seeing and making the government take notice.
Yeah.
You know, it's a really great tool for that.
Yeah. And the organization, social media just makes the organization part of it so easy, which is such an important part. And I think that's why we see with the I have mixed feelings about how I feel the effectiveness of the political revolutions will be that we're seeing with Bernie Sanders, and we're seeing it on the right too. A lot of that Trump is very political revolution. The hard part about that is that kind of movement is very hard to, in our culture, organize, because you have to keep people motivated in non-election seasons. Because if all of it does is show up every election and then fade away, there's no prolonged pressure for change. And really, if we want a political revolution, it's going to take a minimum of a decade of constant pressure before we actually create that change. Where in social movements, it's much easier to stay organized and stay, because the pressure is constantly there, and what the people are feeling is directly related to that. Because yes, everything, all the symptoms of the everything that's causing the politics that people want to change affects them all the time, but they don't always see the direct effect. Where you look at Fight for 15 or Black Lives Matter or these social movements, these are things that people feel every day. So it doesn't go away for them, so they can push for a decade until it gets fixed. So that's my little. So I hope political revolution is possible without it being violent, because most of the cases where there has been successful political revolution has been very bloody. So hopefully it won't get to that. And I really don't think in our country it will. But
when you say bloody, what do you mean exactly by that? We've had lots of blood.
I was gonna say it's kind of violent. Yeah.
I think historically, because of the way the governments are structured, for a while violence was the only way to be effective. You had to make a big show. You had to that was the way you built pressure, because there wasn't the potential for mass consciousness without TV and without social media and without the connection. Where now I think we're able to be much more successful being mindful and not violent. And there'll always be violence within any movement, because those movements are so large with so many people. But I think the violence I'm saying the violence of the movement pushing on the government is now, it feels like it needs to be less and less. It doesn't have to be a focus, because it's more about building a collective consciousness to force that change, as opposed to tearing things down to create that change. And I mean, I think we're in a transition period where we're seeing both, and I think we'll always see both depending on how people react to things. But I mean, I think the civil rights movement would have been drastically different if we had social media and world news and all these things. I think it would have probably been successful much faster and been much less violent on both sides. Because a lot of times too, the violence comes from both sides. So you saw so much in the civil rights movement, so much violence triggered by the police force in massive numbers, and coming from the protesters in massive numbers, where now there's at least a little hesitance to do that, because anything can be on a smartphone.
It's on camera, right?
I guess it makes people mindful, but it in a bit of a different way.
Yeah, that's true. I definitely think that everybody having a camera and being able to broadcast live has, created a different level of awareness of what people are doing and how they're managing these protests and things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that within the protests and within these organizations, people have different agendas. I mean, even though the cause is the same and the problem is the same, even within the organization, still people have a different way. I look at the Civil War. There were all kinds of people fighting in that war, all had their own different agenda and their own different reasons for fighting in that war.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, one war.
Yeah.
Which was odd to me. But
yeah, and I just want to clarify too what I was saying before, because I don't want it to seem like voting is useless, or who's in the government doesn't matter, because obviously the legislation and the actual change does come from those people. So we have people who are aligned with your views already representing you in government. It makes it much easier. My main point is that historically, even when you have, let's say, the House, the Senate, and the presidency is all Democratic, not much gets done without pressure. And the things that have social pressure from the people are the things that tend to get done first. So I think we put too much pressure on. I just have to vote the people in, and then I've done my duty. And if you actually care about those things, yes, please vote, and vote your conscience, and vote for the people you think best represent and will do the things that you believe in. But you also need to be part of these social movements to either fight the people that disagree with you, to try to force them to do these things, or help the people who support those things actually get them done.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Get the person into office, they're going to need all the support possible. There's always going to be somebody on the outside. Somebody's going to be controversial. Somebody's going to not want to see that agenda succeed. And I've been guilty in the early days of voting that, okay, I cast my vote, and as a Black woman, I know that how my ancestors and, my grandparents and everything, how they fought for that privilege and for that right. And sometimes I feel some obligation to vote, to make sure that what they did isn't in vain. And so I find myself now making a very personal choice to get more involved in politics and not just do it out of obligation. And I do understand how, my folks fought, for the right to vote.
Yeah.
But I have to go beyond just feeling obligated and feeling a responsibility. I think a lot of Black people feel that way. And we've got to get beyond that. And once we get beyond that, then once we do vote and put folks in office that we want there, no matter what color they are, but we want to get behind their agenda all the time that they're in office, doing whatever they're doing. Then we get involved with the behind the scenes, the backstage, all of that kind of stuff, and not just the upfront stuff, So
yeah, and I feel like we go ahead. Do you want to say something?
I was just gonna say, I think it's important it's again that short attention span kind of thing. It's like we want it now. We want to vote, and then for it immediately to make a difference, and then to not have to pay attention to it for another 4 years until it starts coming up again, and that doesn't work. And it's not a mindful approach. We have to recognize that we have to get involved and pay attention to the whole process. And I think the way that we're conditioned to do it is very unmindful. We get inundated with this all the time when it's in election season. That's all you hear people talking about. And then, not saying that they don't talk about politics at all, but you have to really kind of look for it to find out what's really going on. And so I think, recognizing that we've been conditioned to do it this way, and we have to kind of be aware and decondition ourselves and recognize, like, how can I personally find a way to stay engaged throughout the process, whatever that looks like for me. So it may mean you're really engaged online and you're, watching videos and signing petitions and doing things, or maybe you're more physically, socially active person. And so you're out there, marching for things and participating in protests. I think, making it in line with who you are, but keeping yourself aware all the time, because not the government, but just we're society conditions us to pay attention to what they want us to pay attention to at different times. And so we have to work to work against that.
Yeah. I also think too that I feel we live in a culture where so many people are looking for a hero or a savior politically. And we need to learn that we need to be our own heroes. Because I think that's very much what happened during the Obama presidency, is when he was running in 2008, he had a lot of the same rhetoric that Bernie Sanders had now about political revolution. And he would constantly be saying, I'm for these things, but unless we have an organized movement behind them, and they're not going to happen. And then he got elected and there was no organized movement to support what he was doing. They came kind of after for specific things, but they didn't go on him. And I don't know enough about politics to know where to place the blame with that. If he would just decided, oh, I'm not going to try to create that movement, or if it's just, my opinion is that it's probably never going to happen within the establishment. I think the government actively tries to halt social movement and activism. So I think you being president and having to work within that system and being really a representation of that system, I think it's very hard for you to then be able to say, well, I'm working within the system, but then I'm also going to try to create this whole outside movement to fight what I'm doing within the system. So I think we have to really empower ourselves. And I think that is actually potentially an upside to Bernie Sanders right now and where he's at, is that because he is not the nominee, he can focus and is focusing on trying to build now, use all those people and build a movement, a lasting movement outside of the establishment. Because the establishment is just created to squash any movements or counter perspectives or anything within it. So it's very hard within the establishment to do those things. You really need to do it, in my opinion, outside. So be your own hero. It's the moral of the story.
Yeah, I like that.
That's great. Do we have any words of wisdom we would like to leave everybody with?
Oh, words of wisdom.
I know I should prep people that this is how I end it, so that people know. Oh, she left.
She was like, screw words of wisdom, I'm out. No, I'm sure that was an accident.
Oh, all right. She said my phone just died.
Oh, yeah, mine's about to die too. Words of wisdom, just keep swimming.
Yes.
Like, that is, I love that quote. Just keep swimming. Just keep going. Follow the current. Like, the universe is an amazingly abundant place. And yes, there's lots of stressors and things, but you just kind of can stay in the current and your own authentic flow. Be good.
And just remember, you're not the only one swimming. I mean, if you're just talking about your mindfulness practice or you're talking about politics, there are millions of people who are not on your exact same journey, because no one is, but are swimming on the same road. So just find hope, and find happiness in that, reach out and try to find those people for support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And they're swimming on that same road, and this same road has been swam since the beginning of time. And I think that really calms me and helps me feel secure, kind of knowing like I'm not on this journey alone. Everyone has had to kind of walk this same journey. And so that's a real comforting thing to kind of remind you of that connection as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you to
You're
Ursula,
welcome.
even though her
Thanks,
phone died.
Ursula.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.